Welcome to Tripod, Improve Photography's nature photography show. This show is for the weekend photo warriors, the wave a flashlight around in the black of nighters, and the F-16 users. This is Tripod.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Tripod. In today's episode, we are talking about selling your fine art nature photography. Whether you want to do it as kind of a side gig, or if you want to get into this as a more of a major part of your income. I'm Jim Harmer, the host of the Improve Photography podcast, and we also have Majid Badazadigan, a nature photographer on the line, as well as Nick Page, who also hosts the Portrait Session podcast. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, there's a ton to talk about when it comes to selling fine art photography, but we want to take kind of an organized process and walk you through exactly the steps that each of us have taken as we've sold our own fine art photography, some of the pitfalls and some of the tips that we've learned to monetize this notoriously difficult area of a photographer's portfolio to monetize. So first, let's talk about preparing the print. Like, let's say I want to make a product that I know this is going to be sold. Majid, what's kind of your process when you do that? Are you printing the photos and having them on hand to sell usually, or are you just putting it on your website and having a website service fulfill them? How do you actually get the product to start with?
Yeah, I think that's a decision you have to make early on. For me, I did try where my website provider Zenfolio basically did the fulfillment for me. And then I shifted gears a couple of years ago. I really wanted to look at each photo, canvas, acrylic, whatever. I wanted to look it over and make sure it met my quality standards before getting it to a client. So that means that I'm absorbing some extra cost to have it shipped to me, and then shipping it to the client. So right now I'm doing self-fulfillment, but when I'm doing a lot of traveling, that gets a lot harder.
Yeah, I agree. I do the same thing. And I think for the way that I work doing fine art, I think that is critical. Every once in a while, I get tempted and I say, oh, somebody places an order and I say, I'm just going to ship it straight to the client. Always ends in disaster. So the colors didn't look right, or something happened. They get the invoice from the printing company and they say, this only cost $100 to print. Why did you charge me $1,000? And it's like, oh my goodness. I just, all kinds of things happen, and I would just rather get it and know this is a good done product and then send it to the customer. I don't sell anything for low prices when it comes to fine art photography, and so I want to make sure they're getting what they paid for. Every once in a while I make a mistake and skimp on that. Every time it comes back to bite me. For example, somebody in Europe ordered one of my prints not that long ago, and they wanted it specifically from a company that I'd only printed from once, and I thought, it's kind of iffy. I'd only printed from them once. I don't know this printer real well, what their colors look like and stuff. Well, the client didn't like the color, but I'd already paid $150 to ship it to Europe.
Oh,
and so it's just a mess when something like that happens. I want it to come to me and make sure it's right. Nick, what do you do?
Well, for me, I don't know if you guys have the same problem, but one of the biggest challenges is figuring out what to print. Like, which ones are going to be the ones that I print for galleries and stuff. So that's one of the things I'm constantly struggling with. One of the ways that I try to determine how popular an image might be is just how it does on social media. For me, I take so many photos that it's really hard to pick my favorites of my children, and figure out which ones I'm going to print and which one's going to be printed large, which one's going to be printed small. What do you do, Majid? You print quite a bit. How do you decide what you print?
It's really weird because what you think is going to sell.
It's gonna be weird. Get ready for it.
It's super weird, man. What you think is going to sell and what actually sells sometimes will just blow your mind. I have a shot of mine that I've sold maybe 6 or 7 prints of. Somebody's like redone their entire family room around it. It's a redwood shot I took 2 years ago. It wasn't even in my like top of the top shots that I had on that trip, like even that day probably, but it's just because of the subject, the redwoods and the light, people just liked it. So a lot of like modern landscape photography is like dark and ominous, and like some of that style that's trending right now is really like these dramatic landscapes with storm clouds and spires and, you know, whatever. And I haven't found really a correlation with that and print sales, like those shots that are my favorite and other photographers' favorites. That doesn't really translate to people buying them.
Right.
That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about it that way. But when somebody's buying a print, they're usually buying a mood. It's going to go in their home. It's going to go in their bedroom, their living room, and etc. And so that's a great example of kind of that, like epic landscape photo, looks really cool, and it probably gets a bajillion likes on Facebook, and I love that kind of style of stuff. But when I walk into my living room, I want it to be peaceful and pretty. I don't want it to be like Batman has been here, right?
You don't want to walk into Mordor.
Exactly. And so that's actually a really good point, Majid, is to... I mean, I also like what you said, Nick, and I do the same thing about going off kind of what works on social and stuff. But at the same time, you have to think about the mood of it being in somebody's home.
Right. So what mediums are you guys printing on? When you guys finally do find that picture that you want to print, are you printing it on canvas? Are you printing it on photo paper? What are you guys printing on?
It's rare that I print on photo paper of photos that sell. In the last few years, everything that I've sold has either been on canvas or metal or an acrylic, something like that. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. As soon as people recognize what it's going to cost to make to get a frame for a big, beautiful print, they're like, I'll take the canvas, right? It's expensive. And the other thing is, especially art buyers who aren't very sophisticated, which is most art buyers that are at least going to buy from me. Somebody who buys from Peter Lick is going to be a sophisticated art buyer. Somebody who buys from Jim is not a sophisticated art buyer.
That's not necessarily true.
So they're looking for somebody for something that's just interesting and different. They want something to talk about in their living room, right? And so they're going to be really taken in by the acrylic photo that's like, this is laminated with a 1/4 inch of acrylic, and that's different, or this is printed on aluminum, and that's different. And so it's going to push them closer to that buy button. Whereas the more sophisticated art buyers, they aren't going to be interested in that kind of gimmick. Not even gimmick, but just trendy stuff. They want the regular traditional luster print with a big fatty expensive frame.
Right. And there's also the ease of just caring for the photos. Like if you're taking a photo from gallery to gallery, ideally it sells, but they don't always sell. And when they don't sell, you have to pack them up and take them somewhere else, and you're moving them all over the place. So like the metal prints and canvas, they're a little bit more durable, and you don't have to be quite so careful with them. I like that. When I was talking to you, Majid, it was a couple days ago, you said that you actually do print quite a bit on photo paper for the more affordable prints. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is what the customer wants. I don't necessarily push them in one direction or another. I think some photographs lend themselves to different print processes. So a photo that doesn't really depend on a high amount of detail, but is more about, or has more of like a painterly feel or that type of thing, is going to print awesome on canvas, because that canvas only prints at like 150 PPI, whereas a print is going to be more like 300. So we have a lot more pixels needed to make a beautiful print on paper, whereas canvas, not so much. You can have you have more leeway there anyway.
Yeah. For like the large format stuff that I do, I really like Canvas because you can get away with those larger sizes and it doesn't look pixelated. Also in the smaller prints, I don't like Canvas as much because of the texture. It kind of takes away from some of the finer detail and stuff. So are you guys selling at all?
And
like,
a small canvas just looks cheap.
it does. It looks so small and floaty.
It's so cheap.
Yeah, it does.
The nice thing about a print is that the mat and the frame, once in a while, once in a blue moon, I'll do this at cost. So I'll mark up the print, but I will do the print in the mat at cost for the client. It just depends. I rarely do this. It is a pain. It's a lot of work, but they can choose what color that frame is and what color the mat is, so it can go with their whatever they have going on. But honestly, the easiest thing by far, Canvas. Like, boom, you get it. It's done.
Yep.
They're light. They're easy to hang. They're approachable. You can see, a canvas, if it's a wrap, when you walk into a room, you can see the image starts on the sides and you can walk right into the image. So I really love Canvas because it just makes my life a little bit easier.
Gotcha. So
yeah, another thing that I like about canvases, today's floor plans and homes are getting really, really open, which means really, really echoey everywhere, and a house can just tend to be loud, and a canvas is a perfect thing to do. That's what we've done in our living room. It's open to 2 stories, and then there's a loft above it, and so the house just gets super echoey and loud. So I made a ginormous canvas print and put it on the wall, and then I stuck foam behind the actual canvas so you can't see it, and it just soaks up a ton of the sound. So when we're talking about what it's actually going to do for somebody's home, that's another nice benefit of it.
That's like the world's most expensive sound muffling.
Yeah, it is.
Awesome.
But I'm going to put a picture up there anyway, so I might as well muffle sound.
Yeah, that's the main reason people buy my prints, for sound gasoline.
Exactly. So,
well, we got to talk about pricing though.
yeah, for sure.
So pricing is the place where people panic, right? Like you finally get somebody who's going to buy a print from you, and it's like, what do I do? This is where I get the panicked Facebook messages on the Improved Photography Facebook page. We have over 500,000 people there, and I bet 500,000 people have asked, where do I price my prints? It can be difficult to do. The simple answer is, though, that I want to tell somebody when you feel panicked about this is, what would you be happy with? Like, how much money would it have to bring in for you to say, sweet, I sold the print today? And for your very first few that you sell, just do that. If you're going to be happy to get $50 over what your printing cost was, charge $50 over what your print cost was, and just get the first 1 or 2 under your belt. And then we can talk about building it up over time to something that'll sustain the business, etc. But don't lose your first sale because you're getting greedy, really trying to get every dime of what the industry standard is. Just make a sale the first time, it would be my advice.
Yep. Yeah, and it totally has to do with how much you're selling and how in demand your stuff is. If you feel like you can sell quite a few at a more of a markup, then maybe it's time to raise your prices. I know I'm slowly starting to raise my prices because like everybody, I struggled with charging enough, but basically when I started, I just doubled the price I doubled my cost, and I was like, okay, that's what it's going to be. And then I started selling more and more, and then I'm marking it up a little bit more. And one of the things I'm curious about from you guys is if your markup is percentage based, like, so say you sell 8x10, do you mark that up the same percentage as you would sell like a 48 by 72 inch print? Do you mark that up the same percentage, or do you say, okay, after a certain point, I don't need to be making quite as much per print just because it's so much more expensive?
I had a photographer friend of mine a couple of years ago that I emailed, and he was selling his 8x10s for like $6.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay,
Gonna have to sell 1 million of them. Right.
So at what point are you going to be able to buy a cup of coffee here? I mean, we have a lot of costs, okay? Like the cost of the equipment, some of us pay for insurance. We are constantly, driving to locations. Last time I checked, gas isn't free. I can't just swipe my card and get a full tank of gas. We have a lot of costs, our time, our expertise, our gear. So when we sell an image for $6, we're devaluing all of our expertise, all of our time, and all of our costs. So I think that pricing should reflect this is valuable. Just like, there's an old saying, like the guy, I'm gonna botch this, but there was a president who hired an engineer because they were having some leaky valve issue, and the engineer came in and he walked up to the pipe and he took a piece of chalk and wrote on the pipe and said, "Cut it here, and that'll be $1,000." And he's like, "Well, that took you 30 seconds. Why did I pay you $1,000?" "Well, you're paying me $1 to write you're paying me $1 to mark that piece of chalk. You're paying me $999 because I know where to mark that piece of chalk." Gotcha. So there's a value to what we do, and yeah. So anyway,
yeah, that's good. Well, so I think the most important thing you can decide, and I kind of alluded to this as we started to introduce this topic, is you need to decide what you want from selling your images. So when I started, I wanted $50 to take my family out to dinner. Happy, right? Was that a sustainable business decision? No, but it made me happy and it gave me the confidence to go and do more. And so I wouldn't go back and change that. It got me started. Now I'm at a totally different place in my business. Only a small percentage of my income comes from selling fine art prints. Most of my income comes from selling photography tutorials, writing reviews of cameras, everything that we do at improvephotography.com. I mean, we have 1 million people every month coming to improvephotography.com. And so that's where my income comes from. So when a print sale does come through, I really am only interested in it if I'm going to make a substantial amount of money. Otherwise, it's just not worth the break in my time and doing my other work. Yeah. So for me, I don't sell any 8x10s. I don't sell 5x7s. I don't sell 11x14s. It's 16x20 and up, and it's $500 and up. If I can't earn $500, I don't want to break away from my main business to go order a print, get it to my house, check the print, go to the post office, mail it to the client, and deal with the customer service, send them the PayPal invoice, all of those things. Because I don't have a great process for that because it's not my daily business. I get several of them in a year, and it's great when they come in. But usually I'm only interested if it's $500 and above. And usually that means I'm selling it to a company who wants, my endorsement or to use my name with their advertising, right. and less so to individual art buyers. But I do get a few of those. So the point that I'm making is you need to decide, maybe what's going to sustain your business is if this is going to be your core business, but also just decide what's going to serve your needs as a person and as a photographer.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance between quantity and how much you value your time. If you're going to be selling tons and tons of them, then you don't need to charge quite as much. Or maybe that's a sign that you could raise your prices and not have to spend so much time, shipping and dealing with all of that. So do you guys sell on your websites? Are you selling only in person? Are you putting your stuff up in galleries? Majid, do you have galleries up, or are you pretty much ordering them as people ask for them?
I have done shows before, and I really like just the fact that you can get out into your community and shake some people's hands and be like, yeah, this is what I do. Come look at my stuff. And they have questions about it. And a lot of people are not exposed. Like the general public is not necessarily exposed to the world we are of just amazing photography all the time. So it really is truly like a mind-blowing experience for them to see, some of these pictures and be like, this is a real place, this, and that type of thing. And I think, Jim makes a really good point, but just a word to our listeners, not everybody's going to be able to get away with, that $500 price point. Jim's an established photographer. He's been doing this for a long time. And he makes great points about how it's got to be worth your time to take it on. I want to make a comment that you don't want to undercut or undersell the industry either. You don't want to devalue like the work that goes into it and the value of photography in general. And I'm sure it's been discussed many times on IP, but just, if you go on Craigslist and say, hey, I'll do your portraits for $20. Well, what does that do to industry as a whole? And are you really providing, professional photography at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a quick way to end the monetization of the field for sure.
What are you telling people, right? What are you telling people? I think this print is worth $6.
Yeah.
What are you telling people?
Which basically means I'm paying you to make images for you.
You might spend more on your coffee this morning
right.
than you'll spend on this that is very close to me, this piece of art that I have made. $6.
Yeah, but at the same time, but at the same time, like, it really just does depend what your process is, because I do have photos up on stock, and if a photo sells on a stock website for $6, I don't care.
Yeah.
It took me I did that 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I uploaded it to iStockPhoto.com and I made $6 today. Big whoop. I don't care that it's sold for the price of a coffee because it didn't take any of my time. And so, sure, hand me the $6 and I'll move on. It doesn't really devalue any of my other work. It's either I get the $6 or I don't. So I'm taking the $6, right? So to me, a lot of the pricing game is about how it fits into me and the other things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
For fine art specifically, a starting point, and I think Jim's already touched on this, if you're new, charge what you want to charge. If you're established, look at what kind of others in the industry are doing and take that into consideration at least. If you are going to sell for much lower than what other people are, then you need to look at your business reasons why, your costs, your what are you telling a customer? Like, what is that saying? Like, your pricing is also tied to your value and maybe even your respect. Like, I'm not going to go to the trouble of signing this print if it's going to be $6. I'm not going to go to the trouble of that. So all things to consider.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. And the other thing with pricing your photography is, if you are going to the point that this is going to have to be a business, that's the time that you start needed to looking at your cost and then putting gravy on top of that. But that's only a tiny sliver of the people who are listening to this episode. It's only a tiny sliver of you who are actually thinking about, hey, I'm going full-time selling landscape photography. And so if you are there, you need to look at everything that you spend to do this sustainably and do it. But for most people, I don't think that's the direction that we're going. We just want some extra money that helps our photography in long, and so do what's going to make you happy. But you do have to actually put something on paper. So my tip is, do this now. Do it today. Just open up a Google Doc and make some prices. 8x10, $75. 11x14, $150. 16x20. $200, 20x24, just go through, just throw it on paper. And when somebody asks, just give them the price sheet. But I will say that I often make double what I would on a print by not putting the price out there. It works beautifully. The best question you can ask is, what's your goal? What are you buying a print for? So somebody will email me and say, hey, I love this picture you took in Italy of Tuscany. I want this picture of Val d'Orcia. And I will email, and they'll usually say, what's the price for this? And I'll say, hey, thanks a lot. I'm really glad you liked the print. The pricing is going to depend on a lot on the material and where you want to put the print in your home. What's the space you want to fill with the photo? And by doing that, it helps me walk them through size. I don't want them picking the size of the print according to their price. Otherwise, they're going to end up with the 8x10. I want them to have something beautiful and big in their house. And most people don't recognize just how small a 16x20 looks on a big wall. It looks puny. So I'll have them do that. Sometimes even take a picture. Hey, this is my sofa in my living room. This is the wall that I want it on. And I'll say, great, we're going to need 30 by 40 inch print, whatever that is in centimeters. I'm sorry that we're throwing around dollars and inches here for those of you in other countries. But we're going to need a very large print for that. And then say for this, so this is the print, this is the material we want it on. And then I'll usually ask them, what's your budget for this print? You can only win by asking that because people are going to be afraid of saying something too low that would offend you. And I can't tell you how many times somebody has responded and said something double what I would have asked for, and I'll respond and say, yeah, I think we could make it work for that price. Or if it's not enough, I say, I'm sorry, I don't. My prints start at $500, and sometimes they're willing to work with that, and sometimes not. But by asking what's your budget for this print can be really, really, really beneficial. And because fine art it just depends what the person is willing to pay for it. I think that's a perfectly fair thing to ask. It's very valuable to them, and so they're willing to pay for it. Great. I'm happy to take your money. I'm a business, right?
That's awesome.
Art is subjective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So deciding, coming up with terrible. You're gonna have to edit. Okay.
All right. So we've priced our photos. We got the product actually ready to sell. We've kind of chosen what photos we want. Now we have to decide how we're actually going to market these things and get them out the door. And this is probably the most difficult thing right now for nature photographers is how do you actually get people interested? So let's not talk about philosophy and theory for a little bit. Okay. Let's totally set that aside. Let's talk about the last print sale we actually made, and let's go around and say, where did that actually come from? And then, maybe if there's another, maybe not the very last one you sold, but a segment that you've done well with. Where does it come from? Nick, you've done some interesting things in showing at wineries and stuff. What's actually turned into dollars for you?
As many gallery showings as I have, I sell most of them just by posting to social medias, posting to Facebook, and people messaging me saying, "Oh my God, I have to have a print of that. How much?" And then the conversation starts. So really, for me, it's about the number of eyeballs I can get on a photo. And for me, I have a decent following on Facebook, so just posting to Facebook, most of my sales come off of that. So
you do a good job with that too, because you don't just post the picture. I've seen you before post a picture of you holding like a life-size huge canvas.
Yep.
And that's so different when they can see it as a product and not just another photo online. Exactly. So I think you did that really well, and I think that probably contributes to it.
And it really gives it a sense of scale too, because if you print something really big, there's nothing cooler than just holding it into your hands and being like, look at this giant photo I printed. And it gives it a nice sense of scale.
Yeah, I think that's cool. So have the gallery showings been worth it for you? Is that something you're going to keep going after? I mean, it's fun, but is it actually translating into dollars?
It is. It's such an initial investment in order to fill the walls of a place. Like some places are easier to fill than others. Right now, I have my stuff up at let's see, 3 wineries, 2 coffee shops, and a bank. And one of those wineries has just like walls for days, and it took like 35 prints in order to fill the place. And
that's a lot of money.
Yes, and it's a great opportunity because that's really my perfect audience. Really is people that have a little bit of alcohol in them and they have a little bit of cash in their wallet. That's exactly who I want my art in front of. So it's worth
Drunks.
it. Exactly. Not only drunks, but wealthy drunks.
You need a trench coat and go to the nightclub. See, look what I got.
Exactly. But so it pays for itself eventually, but that initial investment's really tough. But the good thing is, that's a physical product that I will always have. And if they don't sell there, they'll sell somewhere else down the road. And
that's a very good point about the initial cost. I went to a gallery opening for Mark Rezinsoff, who's a local photographer here. We met in Oregon. So this podcast is part of the ImprovePhotography.com network. And on Improve Photography, we do completely free photography workshops all over the world several a year, and we'll have 50, 100 people come out, just readers of the website, listeners of these podcasts, and come shoot with us for a few days. And so we did one of these events in Oregon, and that's where I met Mark, and we became friends. So I went to his gallery opening, and he said it was well over $3,000 to just make the prints and get he even made the frames, and it was $3,000 to do it. And so and he was mostly doing it for the experience and the fun of it, but he was saying, I hope I sell at least 1 or 2 to recoup some of my costs, right? So if you're doing a gallery showing, awesome opportunity, but hold on to your wallet. It's going to be a lot.
Yep.
I think I probably got lucky, but the first time that I did a show, I broke even. And there's a lot of upfront costs when it comes, if you're trying to fill up, like we've talked about, walls full of your images, it can get up there pretty fast. And then you're also paying for the fee of just being able to be there. So before you're even, talking about printing, you still have a payment to join that festival or join that open house or whatever it is where you're showing your work. Unless you're lucky enough to have a place that will allow you to show your work for free. The value in showing your work is just the old-fashioned way of business. Handshake. Hey, I don't want your like on Facebook. I want you to meet me. I want you to see me eye to eye. Yep, I'm a real person. This is what I do. I go out and take pictures, and sometimes I don't sleep. And I'll tell you the story about this picture, and then they have a connection to it. And we get so caught up in our phones and in our screens, and it's like, oh, look at this picture. It's 800 pixels wide. It's a beautiful picture, and I forgot about it. Look at that. There's another picture. Wow, that's awesome. But when you see a 4-foot canvas, and it makes people just stop in their tracks, what the is that? One of my Thor's Well shots, which is a crazy place where everyone knows what Thor's Well is at this point, but
in the United States, at least, it's a location in Oregon on the coast that basically has a big sinkhole in the rocks, and the water pours into it and flows out. Just looks very ethereal, kind of mystical kind of place.
People would just stop and be like, "What the is that?" And then you come up and it's just a great conversation starter, and just it really helps if you're personable and you have some sales skills and that type of thing, but just getting in front of people. And then also think of it as some people are going to buy some stuff there, but your name is now in your community. Your business card is in people's pockets. And I have had sales residually that 6 months later, someone said, "Hey, I met you and I really like your work and I'm ready to buy." So
yeah, that's way cool.
Yeah. There's just something about seeing a physical print that you don't get by seeing the digital copy of it online. And it just increases the value of your art to actually see it in the physical form. It's hard to put a value on.
Yeah. Well, for me, I guess 100% of the nature photography, fine art kind of stuff that I do is when people see the photos that I post online and email me and ask to purchase them, which is difficult to do because I have to hide my email address. I used to have my email address out in the wild, and I literally would get 300 emails in a day, and I would spend hours working at it, and eventually I said, this just can't happen. So I had to just hide it. But somehow people sometimes get through with a print order, and so that'll usually go to my personal assistant, and he'll kind of walk through the process to order the print. At some point, it'll come to me when I need to actually talk about the price and prepare the file for printing.
Yeah.
So that's how mine have come. Another one that I have had success with is when I have a photo of a location that specifically fits a company, to tell the company. They're often willing to buy it. If you take a photo of a cityscape or something and it really highlights one building, like look it up, see who owns the building, and email it to them. I made a print once that I can't even remember how big it was. It was was it 10 or 18 feet wide? I mean, it was humongous. I could only find one place in the country that prints this big. Just a humongous print to go in the lobby of the building, because I took a simple picture of the building and I emailed them to say, hey, is it okay if I use your building in advertising my business? And they said, yeah, that's fine. Can we buy one? And I said, sure. And I kind of wanted to just give it to them because they were allowing me to use their property in my photo, but they ordered a magnificently huge print. For those of you outside the United States, we're talking like 3 to 6 meters long. I don't remember exactly how big it was, but it was a monster print.
Wow.
So all kinds of opportunities come when you talk to people who have money, and companies have money.
That's so cool.
That's true. It was a great client.
Yeah.
One of my biggest
Bring
sales.
more of those guys around. I don't get that every day.
One of my biggest sales ever. I sold a handful of 3 foot, roughly 1 meter, acrylics to a building. Basically, a business just wanted to put my work all over their building. So
that's awesome. Acrylics are expensive too.
yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's always great. Somebody that can reach into their pocket, somebody who can write the check.
Yeah, I've always wanted to get hooked up with a brand new hotel that's decorating, and they have all those rooms to fill. Like, how sweet would that gig be? That's
a nice order right there.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Well, another one that I've tried just recently, my brother's a dentist, and so I put some prints in his office. It's only been about 2 months, but I haven't sold anything yet. But I need to get good cards there, that say the price under each print to see if that'll do anything. But it's something that I'm at least trying. But I don't sell as many prints as you guys do. I'll bet you guys sell more prints than I do. So I'm liking hearing the advice you guys have had about where you're getting your clients. Nick, I think the way you're doing this on social media is excellent. Everybody listening, definitely go check out Nick Page Photography on Facebook, just at least so you can see some of these posts that he's putting out. And man, it makes me want to have them in my house. I mean, they're really beautiful stuff.
Yeah, and one of the things that we haven't really talked about that I've done is when I have an older print that has been around for a while, I just want it gone. One of the things that I've been doing is just auctioning them off on Facebook.
This is like the TJ Maxx clearance sale.
Exactly. I just and I say this is number one of one prints, and this goes to the highest bidder, and whoever's got the highest bid on Sunday night takes it home. And sometimes it'll go for double what I would have asked for it if it's a popular image. Sometimes it goes for a little under, but it's always a guaranteed sale. So if you have, old material just laying around, just auction it off on Facebook. You will be surprised at how it's like they forget that you have all these prints laying around, and then you throw one up on an auction and suddenly they're like, they have to have it. So I've had some sell for like really great prices, and there for a while, especially before Christmas. I was selling like a couple a week. And I think last year I probably sold 10 or 15 prints, just auctioning them off on Facebook. And a lot of them are old prints that I would have like given away because I was like, I just can't look at this anymore. It's ugly. It's my old work. I don't want to be selling it. So yeah, auctioning them off on Facebook is a fun thing to do.
Yeah, very good advice. Well, we've had a ton of good tips. Thank you guys for sharing your knowledge in this area. But in this episode, we want to give a little bit of inspiration, kind of a parting shot to you so you can sink your teeth into nature photography a little bit more as we depart. And I want to share of an artist that I really love. I've had him on the Improve Photography podcast and talked, and we have an interview with him there. We should get him onto this show as well, is Ryan Dyer. Dyer is D-Y-A-R. And he is just, in terms of the epic light battle that landscape photographers are doing, trying to get just epic, incredible lighting in the photo, Ryan wins. He wins against all the photographers. And that's really what I like about his photos. He has some great locations and compositions, etc. But it's the epic lighting that he just does really, really, really well. And so I just want to encourage you to all check him out at RyanDyerPhotography.com. I really like his stuff.
Really, really good at processing as well. Mm-hmm. He's put out a lot of great videos. And he's one of the leaders in the industry as far as post-processing, and his style is incredible. You can, just a quick note to end up the show here. You can find me on Instagram at Majid Badazadigan. Nick?
You can find me at facebook.com/Nick Page Photography or nickpagephotography.com.
And I'm just on improvephotography.com. You'll find everything that I do right there. Well, thanks everybody for chatting with us, a little bit of nature photography. The show is still new, so please take 1 second and go over to iTunes and give us, we're really only accepting 5-star ratings right now. So if you would go ahead and give us an honest rating on iTunes. We really do appreciate whatever feedback you have. But if it's 5-star, we will like you better. It helps us get the show out there. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.